Okay, so today's topic is equivalent expressions. It should be on page 11. All right, so equivalent expressions. Let's start off with what is an expression and how does it compare to an equation? So basically, an equation has equal signs versus an expression does not have equal signs. Okay, that's literally it. So an expression will not have an equal sign and an equation will. Okay, so here's our beautiful expression versus an equation. Feel free to do the little clouds just like me, okay? Because, yeah, why not? All right, so now let's go into some vocabulary, right? So we have terms. Well, what are they? Notice the shapes I'm doing, okay? That's going to coordinate with our examples. So make sure you keep track of those. Terms are parts of an expression separated, sorry for my handwriting, separated by adding and subtraction signs. Okay, so that's what separates terms. So let's write an example. 4x squared plus 3x minus 2. So here we have one term. And notice that I'm using the same zigzag that I used in the definition, right? So here we have our first term. Here we have our second term, and I know this is my second term because I have a plus sign separating them. Notice that in this one term, I'm multiplying. That does not matter. You can multiply and divide as many things as you want. What separates it is the plus or the minus. So even though this is just a number, you got that right. This is our third term. There is no limit to how big or small a term can be. The only thing that matters is that there is a clear plus or minus separating them. Okay, so then now we're going to look at the parts of an expression. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is the degree of an expression, and that's going to be this circle. Okay, degree, which is the largest exponent in an expression. Okay, so the largest exponent here, we have a 2, a 1, and then that's a constant, so that doesn't count. So the degree of this expression would be 2. Then we have our variables, which are going to have a triangle. Oops, sorry, you guys. Okay, a triangle. This is the variable, which we should already know what that is, right? A letter that represents a number. Okay, so where are my letters, my variables? Here's one, right? And then here's another. Okay, that's it. Those are my variables. Next, we have a constant. Okay, so my constant is going to have a nice, beautiful heart next to it. Constant. What are those? That's just a number by itself. It can be any number, right? It does not matter. Now remember, we will always carry the sign in front of it, right? That is the ugliest heart I have ever seen. It's okay though, don't judge my heart. Okay, so it is a -2. All right, next thing we're gonna label is our coefficients. So our coefficients, I'm gonna use a different color, okay. Our coefficients are these right here. So I'm gonna draw like a little arrows pointing at them, right? So, okay, that 4, positive 4, and that positive 3 are going to be your coefficients. If I misspell something, do not judge me, okay? Which is always going to be the number in front of variable, right? Notice that we're multiplying, okay? So let's go ahead and put here multiplying. That's what I'm writing there, okay? And by the way, let's draw a little cloud. Psst. This is an expression. This is, I forgot the word is. I love my pens, they erase. This is an expression. And how do I know that? Because there's no equal sign. Okay, cool. All right, so moving on. So that is the constant. Okay, so we already talked about that. Okay, so now let's talk about types of expressions. Okay. Ooh, sorry, I moved the camera, my bad. Okay, so now let's talk about types of expressions. And then the number of terms it has. And then an example. Okay, so, oh my bad. Hopefully y'all saw that earlier. Psst, this is an expression. Okay, so let's go back over here. Okay, I'm trying to have y'all see the whole thing, so if you're like running behind, or you can always pause, right? Okay, cool. Types of expressions. So we have a monomial. And if you've taken science or science class, you should know what mono is, right? Monomial. What does that mean? What is that the prefix of, right? It means one, so it is one term. Because of this right here, right? This is how we know that's one. So what's an example of that? Just 2 or 10x. Each one of these is an example of one monomial, right? Our next one, I don't have Rona, I promise. Okay, so then we have binomial. And then here, this word bi is the reason we know it has 2 terms. Okay, so an example of that, right, would be 10x plus 2. We have this plus sign separating it, right? So 1, 2. This is 2 terms, binomial. Okay, then we have a trinomial. So can we guess by now how many terms a trinomial, right? Tricycle, triangle, all of these words have that prefix of tri for a reason, because it represents the number 3. So trinomial has 3 terms. So an example of that is, right, the one we had above, or x squared plus 10x plus 2. Okay, so you have two additions here, right, separating them. So this is 1 plus 10x plus 2. Okay, and then the last one is a polynomial. And the secret here is the poly, right? Poly means many. So that means we have 2 plus terms. So if you're feeling lazy and you have a trinomial, you can just say it's a polynomial. Okay, it can have more than one name. So an example would be 3x cubed plus x squared plus 10x plus 2. That would be considered a polynomial, right? It has many terms. We kind of get lazy after try. We're like, you know what? Let's just call them polynomials. It's all good. Okay, moving on. Now, here is going to be, let's do our first example. Okay. So, example. Okay. So our example is going to be identify the parts of the following expression. And we know expressions don't have equal signs, right? Okay, cool. So the expression we're going to have here is 8p squared plus 7p plus 2r minus 5. Okay, so let's start with what type is it? Okay, well, by type, we need to count the terms, right? So we have 8p squared plus, so that's one term, 7p plus, so that's 2 terms, 2r, that's 3 terms, minus 5. So that's 4 terms. So this would be classified as a polynomial. It has a lot, right? It has 4 terms. Okay. So then now we're going to look at variables. What variables are we using? Okay. So we have a P, and an R. So we're using P and R. Okay, so next would be the degree. Okay, so what's degree of this? Where is the highest exponent? Our highest exponent is right there. So then that would be a degree of 2. Then we're going to look at our coefficients. And they're going to have the little arrow. So what coefficients do I have? Okay, well, let's go find them. Remember, coefficients are always going to be the numbers that are in front of the variables that we're using. So these variables is P and R. Though our coefficients are going to be in front of these. Okay, so we have P squared. So what's the coefficient? An 8. We have a P here. So what's the coefficient? A positive 7. And I know that's positive because of the plus sign. And then we have our R, and that's a positive 2 because of the plus sign. I know this is going to be a positive 2, right? If it were a minus, and I know that the negative would carry. Okay, so last thing we're going to find or identify, whatever, is going to be our constants. Do we have any? Now remember, a constant right up here is a number by itself. Okay, so a number by itself is right here. Notice that I'm carrying the sign in front of it, right? It is a subtraction sign, but because I'm looking at the constant only, I'm going to carry the sign with it. So that means that my constant here is a negative 5. Okay, so we need to make sure that we already get in the habit of always carrying the sign. Okay, so that is part 1 of your notes. Now we're gonna move on to an activity.